All right, hello everyone. Today we're going to solve some equations using the quadratic formula. The equations we do today might be able to be solved another way, but to get credit, you have to show us you using the quadratic formula. You have to show your work. The answers will be provided to you, but you have to show your work to get credit. Also on the worksheet, right here on the formula on the worksheet, it only has a plus, but it should be plus or minus. That might be a little confusing right now, but it'll make sense to you at the end of this video. This video is going to get you through numbers 1 through 3 and then 5 and 6 on the worksheet. So the first one we're going to do is going to look like this right here. It's going to be x squared minus 8x plus 7, and that's equal to 0. The first thing we need to happen for these to solve using the quadratic formula, it has to be equal to 0. This one is equal to 0, so we're ready to get to work. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to list what our A, our B, and our C is. Well, on this one, our A comes from in front of the x squared, which is 1. There's really an imaginary 1 there. My B is in front of the x term, which is negative 8. And then C is my constant, or my number without a variable, and it's 7. So now we're ready to plug these numbers into our formula. Here's where a lot of freshmen make mistakes, or Algebra 1 students make mistakes, because this is a negative b. What that's telling me is I need a negative, whatever my b is, I'm going to put inside these parentheses. Well, my b is negative 8. So I have to have these two negatives if my b is negative 8. The negative's always going to be on the outside of the parentheses. And then you write whatever your b is inside the parentheses. That's going to be plus or minus. I need b squared, which is negative 8 squared. Again, use parentheses. Every time you're punching or plugging numbers into a formula, use parentheses. My formula has minus 4. That minus 4 will always be there. I need what my a is, which is 1, what my c is, which is 7. That's all under the square root, or the radical. And then on the bottom, I need 2 times whatever my a is, which is 1. So that's what it's going to look like. There's parts of this that you can punch into the calculator, but we're going to do it all longhand this first couple of times. So basically this says I've got a negative 1 times a negative 8, or a negative negative 8. Well, two negatives make it positive, so that becomes positive. Plus or minus is still going to stay there. We're going to deal with that in a little bit. That gives me the square root of, well, negative 8 squared, or negative 8 times negative 8 gives me positive 64. This can get a little tricky, so let's do it the long way. This gives me minus 4 times 1. Well, minus 4 times 1 gives me negative 4. So I've dealt with these two numbers. Now I've got to do negative 4, which is what that equaled, times 7. So negative 4 times 7 gives you a negative 28. So that's a minus 28. And that's going to be over 2 times 1 is 2. So that gives me 8 plus or minus 64 minus 28 is 36 over 2. Well, if you remember on Monday and Tuesday, we talked about the discriminant being the number underneath the radical. So just that number. Well, 36 is greater than 0, or we can think of it as a positive number. And a positive number underneath the radical tells me I should have 2 real answers when I get down to the bottom. So I better have 2 real answers. Let's see what happens. At 8 plus or minus the square root of 36 is 6, all over 2. Now we're ready to deal with this plus or minus. So I really have 2 equations here. The first one I have is 8 plus 6 over 2. We're going to write that out, 8 plus 6 over 2. And the second one I have is 8 minus 6 over 2. Well, 8 plus 6 is 14, still over 2. 8 minus 6 is 2, still over 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I've got 2 answers. I knew I should have gotten 2 real answers. So there's my answer. Again, we're not going to get into imaginary numbers. All the ones we're going to do in today is going to have real numbers as our answers, and then also they're going to be whole numbers. There's not going to be any more square root signs or radicals or anything like that. We're going to keep it simple. Let's get the basics, make sure we know how to use the quadratic formula. So that's your first formula for the day. That should help you with 1 through 3, numbers 5 and 6.